By any onset measurement, Jesus of Nazareth is done more to change the course of the history of the world than any other person. For example, all I have to do is look at my calendar and it says 2024. What is that? That means 2024 AD, AD standing for the year of our Lord. And so all of history is either BC or AD. So even as a teenager, that convinced me that Jesus was different than anybody else who had ever lived. Well, a few years ago, I thought, let me try and make another test. So I went to the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress is arguably the largest library in the world. I thought I would check several years and see what biographies the Library of Congress had checked in. So I tried to think of who are the great people who have lived that I know in the world. Well, I thought of Abraham Lincoln. I thought of Mahatma Gandhi. I thought of Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Aristotle, Mother Teresa. And then I wanted to put in the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I thought of Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, all of these. So I did that. I checked the Library of Congress for several years, and I went through all of these and tried to look at how many books had been cataloged in that year by these people. I found by far away, they had cataloged in any given year more books on Jesus of Nazareth than any other person. Now, what I tried to do was I tried to cull out any of the books on Christian faith as a religion because I just wanted biographies. So I thought this is a rather strange thing because this is an individual who lived 2,000 years ago who really never did any of the things that we normally attribute to greatness. For example, he never held public office. He never authored a book. He never led an army. He never owned a home or any real estate. He never traveled more than 200 miles from when he was born. So I decided, well, that's good, but why don't I go back to the earliest of the biographies? And as I went back to the earliest of the biographies, I'm sure there were many, but I found 4 that are regularly accessible. One of the biographies was by a fisherman by the name of John. Another one was a tax collector by the name of Matthew. A third one was by Dr. Luke. And the 4th one was written by a guy called Mark. I couldn't find out what he did for a living. He could have been a hippie for all I know. Anyway, as I was deciding to look at these biographies, I thought, well, I'll look particularly at Luke's biography because Luke was a medical doctor. Well, as I was doing that, I learned about a man by the name of Bill Bright. Bill Bright was somewhat like Jesus. He was a traveling teacher, and he taught on campuses around the country. Well, he had this brainstorm at some point in time to make a movie of the life of Jesus. So he picked Luke's biography, and I thought, well, that's good. I'm studying Luke. He wants to make a movie of the life of Jesus from Luke's biography. Well, he wanted to do it more than just make a movie. He wanted to shoot all the video in the land where Jesus lived. He wanted all the actors as much as possible to be from that same area because they would understand the culture. Well, this was released in 1979 by MGM, and it was called the Jesus Film. I don't know why they didn't just call it the Jesus Movie, but they called it the Jesus Film. Now, at first, it didn't really take a hold, but now in 2024, they have documented there have been, in these 45 years, over 5 billion, that's billion with a B, views of the Jesus Film. Now, one of the reasons it didn't really catch on much at first was it was really recorded in English. But Bill Bright said, so much of the world doesn't really speak English as their mother tongue. So he said, we've got to translate this into other languages, Spanish, French, German, Chinese, whatever. And so it was translated into many other languages, but it was slow going, but with the computer technology getting smarter and smarter and faster, it became easier. Well, now with the introduction of artificial intelligence, it's made it really pretty easy. And as of January 2024, the Jesus film had been translated into over 2,100 languages. This means that anybody in the world who has two things, if they've got a cell phone and an internet connection, can watch the Jesus film in over 2,100 languages. That's the mother tongue of over 95% of the people living in the world. So I said, wow, that shows me that Jesus is different than any other person. So I thought, well, I need to go back and I really read Luke's biography. And he said a lot of things that people agreed with. He said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love your enemies, not only your friends. That may have been a little bit harder to take. But Jesus said one thing that really got him into trouble. He said he was God. Now, the Jews who lived in the land, they were really aggravated with this because the Jews were hardcore monotheists who believed there was only one God that you couldn't see who lived way up in the heavens someplace. So Jesus aggravated the Jews. The Romans were in control of all the land, and they were just the opposite. The Romans believed that anybody in their house, any city, any community, any country could have all the gods they wanted. They even made Caesar a god. The Romans did have one thing that made them aggravated with Jesus. They didn't tolerate any one person who said, there is only one God and it's me. So that got Jesus in trouble with both the Jews living in the land. It got him in trouble with the Romans who controlled the land. So he went on to tell people, and he told his closest followers that he was God, and they had trouble believing this. So Jesus said, I'll make a prediction to prove that what I'm telling you is true. And here's my prediction. One is, I will be killed, and two, in 3 days, I will come back to life. Well, his close followers weren't pretty sure what to think about that, but it turns out the first part's pretty easy to document. He was killed on a Roman cross by the Roman government. Now, the Romans didn't have a gas chamber or an electric chair or a guillotine. They had a rather gruesome way to kill people who were dissidents. They would hang them on a cross, put that on the road, and just leave them there until they died, generally in 3 or 4 days, and then let the vultures and the insects and everything pick over the body. So Jesus actually died in 1 day. So there were two enterprising fellows who came to the Roman authorities and said, look, Jesus is dead, and you know that he's dead because one of your Roman soldiers pierced his side with a spear and said, yep, this guy is dead. So would you let us bury him? So the Roman authorities said, sure, you can take him and bury him. So these two fellows did. They took him and they buried him. And then after he was buried, the people that really hated Jesus came to the Roman authorities and said, look, we don't want any skullduggery taking place. He said he was going to come back to life after 3 days. So here's what we're asking you to do. The cover stone has been put in place. Put the Roman seal on it and station some soldiers there for at least 3 days. And then we'll know that he's dead and gone for good. So the Roman authorities agreed to that. So it came 3 days, and it was early in the morning, which happened to be a Sunday. And there were some women who had been friends of Jesus, and they thought, we ought to go and pay our final respects to Jesus. And that's nothing unusual. People have been going to cemeteries to pay respects for the dead for a long time. So these women came, and when they got there, what they found was so unusual. First of all, the Roman seal had been taken away. The headstone had been moved away. There were no soldiers there, so they peeked in the tomb, and there is no body. The body is gone. So they say there's something has happened here. So they hustle back to tell the fellows who are Jesus' closest followers, and they said, you need to go check this out because there's nobody, the tomb has been taken and there's no body in there. So Jesus' closest followers went back, and sure enough, the body is gone. And here's what they figured. Everybody is going to assume that since Jesus said he would raise after 3 days and come back to life again, we got in and stole the body. So they did what people do who are scared. They went into hiding. It's not uncommon for people who get scared to hide. Children, when they're scared, will hide. So these guys found a building with an empty room. They went into that empty room. They closed and locked the door. And they're sitting there trying to contemplate, what do we do now? Because when people find out the body is gone, we're going to be chopped liver. Well, not literally. That means they're going to be killed. They assume that the Roman authorities are going to kill them, so they aren't sure what they should do. But while they're contemplating, lo and behold, there comes right through this wooden closed and locked door a man. And the man looks at them and says, hi, fellas, I'm Jesus. Well, they didn't know what to think. They didn't know whether to believe it. They didn't know what to do. So he says, just chill out, calm down. I did come back to life, and I'm going to go away. I'll be back next week to talk to you some more. So he went right back through that closed door, went away, and they're saying, what do we do now? I think it really was Jesus. So whether they stayed in that same room, whether they went to another room, Luke's biography doesn't really tell us, but Jesus did come back and he says, now, do you believe me now that I'm Jesus? And they said, we believe. And he says, here's what I'm asking you to do. I want you to go and tell everybody that everything I said was true. I did come back from the dead, and I'm alive. And so this is kind of where Luke's biography ends, but secular history tells us that the 10 of the 11 men went out everywhere telling what they had experienced. And secular history also tells us that 10 of those 11 men were martyred by the Roman authorities for telling the story that Jesus was alive. Well, at this point, the Roman Empire thinks, well, whatever happened to the body of Jesus, it's gone. We've killed these 10 of his closest friends. This will be the end of the story. Exact opposite happened. Over the next 3 or 4 decades, hundreds of thousands of people in the Middle East came to believe what those 10 followers of Jesus said, that he was God, that he came back from the dead, and that he proved it. So at that point, history gets a little sketchy. We're really not sure where this happened, but maybe in a small group, they're sitting around and one guy says to another guy, the day that Jesus came back from the dead's got to be a very special day. Why don't we make it a holiday? And they all seemed to agree on that, and they said, what should we call it? And they said, well, call it Easter. Well, it wasn't in English because those guys didn't speak English. I think it was an Aramaic language. The English translation of Easter is Easter. So there you have it.